I have this single dollar bill sitting right here on the desk in front of me. Just a regular crumpled up $1 bill.
Okay, yeah.
And normally, I mean, you look at a piece of paper like this and it just registers as background noise, right? It's a candy bar from a vending machine. Or maybe it's just the exact change you need for a gas station coffee.
Right, it's just pocket weight.
Exactly. It's pocket weight. But holding it right now, my entire perception of this specific piece of paper has been completely shattered
Because of the mass from the source material.
because of the mathematical reality.
Mhm.
If you are, say, 20 years old, this dollar is not a vending machine soda. It is an $88 seed.
Yeah, that stat is wild.
It is mind-blowing. One single dollar saved and invested at age 20 has the mathematical potential to turn into $88 by the time you hit retirement age.
Right.
An 88-time multiplier on a single piece of paper.
It's incredible. And it forces a complete psychological reframe of, every single transaction you make.
Oh, complete.
Because when you stop viewing money as static currency and you start viewing it as this captured potential energy, the daily decisions you make take on a completely different weight.
Yes.
You aren't handing a barista $5. You are handing them 440 future dollars.
Which makes me want to go back in time, find my 20-year-old self, and literally slap that artisan latte right out of my hand.
I think we all feel that way, honestly.
I mean, the math is explosive. But the friction here, the really tricky part, is that in your 20s, your brain isn't wired for potential energy.
No, not at all.
Your brain is wired for immediate social validation. Like, you want to look rich right now. So today we're doing a deep dive into psychology of wealth building through the decades of your life.
And we are tossing out all the formal, dry financial jargon.
Oh, absolutely. If you want a textbook lecture about, like, the history of mutual funds, you are in the wrong place.
Right, because we are mapping out the behavioral journey from the mathematical invincibility of your 20s through the chaotic meat grinder of your 30s.
The messy middle.
Yeah, the messy middle, into the complex fork in the road of your 40s, and finally, the legacy building of your 50s and beyond.
Because the numbers underlying all of this are actually relatively straightforward. The math is simple.
It really is. The human brain is what complicates the math.
Yes.
I mean, we have egos, we have fear, we experience lifestyle envy. The goal of this deep dive is to isolate the specific psychological traps that derail wealth at every age.
And more importantly, the mechanical strategies you use to disarm those traps.
Yeah.
So we have to start in the 20s.
The invincibility decade.
Right. The decade where you are, mathematically speaking, a billionaire of time. But emotionally, you are a confused mess trying to project competence to the world.
Oh, yeah. You're trying to fake it till you make it.
Exactly. We go to college, we pick a major, we map out this perfect 10-year plan. Yet the data we pull shows that 62% of college graduates are not working in the careers they intended to pursue.
62%. That is massive.
And 1 in 4 young adults cannot even find a job in their desired path at all.
Well, there is a staggering mismatch between expectation and reality early in life.
Yeah.
You spend 4 years building an identity around a specific profession. And when the market rejects that identity, or when you simply realize you hate the work, it creates a profound psychological crisis.
Oh, I bet.
Interestingly, though, the data flips when you look at highly successful, high net worth individuals later in life.
Wait.
Yeah, 67% of those millionaire profiles actually do work in their original field of study.
Wow. I was trying to visualize that initial mismatch for a 20-something, and it feels like it's like spending 4 years packing the most incredible expensive suitcase for a ski trip.
Okay, I like this.
You buy the heavy coats, you get the thermal layers, the really expensive boots, and then the day you graduate, you open the door and step out into the Sahara Desert.
Right.
Nothing you packed is useful. You didn't measure twice and cut once. You just packed blindly based on what, like, a high school guidance counselor suggested.
And the sunk cost fallacy hits so hard right there. You feel behind instantly.
Oh, completely.
And when people feel behind, their behavioral reflex is to skip steps to catch up. They attempt to compensate for that internal career anxiety by acquiring the external trappings of success.
The nice car, the apartment.
Exactly. You want the reward without enduring the foundation building phase.
Which is that classic fake it till you make it trap. You think, my career is a mess, I'm working in middle management instead of architecture, but hey, at least I could lease a BMW so my college friends think I'm crushing it.
Yeah, and that leads directly into the debt statistics we see.
Right. The average person in their 20s is carrying $20,000 in non-mortgage debt.
Which is terrifying.
Is a massive ball and chain strapped to your ankle at the exact moment you're supposed to be sprinting out of the starting blocks.
And the irony is that just a few months prior, that same individual was perfectly content surviving in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates.
Eating cheap noodles.
Right. Stretching a $20 bill over an entire weekend, they had a massive capacity for frugality.
They really did.
But the second that first entry-level paycheck clears, a psychological switch just flips. They suddenly feel entitled to a luxury loft and organic groceries.
Okay, but let me challenge that entitlement narrative for a second.
Yeah.
Because if I'm 22, listening to this deep dive, I'm thinking, isn't this the exact time I am supposed to live it up?
I hear that a lot.
Right. I mean, you have no joint pain. You can stay out past midnight without ruining your entire week. You have 0 dependents. Why live like a miserable monk when you finally have a little bit of cash flow?
Whoa.
Building a network, traveling, having diverse experiences,
Yeah.
those have real tangible value in your 20s.
No, I agree completely. The goal is not complete deprivation,
Okay,
because deprivation leads to financial burnout, much like crash dieting leads to binge eating.
that makes sense.
The psychological secret here is the sequencing of your cash flows. The rule is to spend after you save, never save after you spend.
Because if you wait until the end of the month to see what's left over, the answer is always 0.
Always 0. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time allotted, right?
Right.
Well, the financial equivalent is that lifestyle expands to consume all available resources.
Wow, that is so true.
So if you automate a 20% savings rate the day your paycheck hits, the remaining 80% is guilt-free.
Okay, I like that.
You can travel, you can buy the nice dinner, but you operate within an artificially constrained environment. You maintain a slightly smaller footprint. You keep a roommate for an extra 2 years.
Right. You generate a financial margin while still actually engaging in life.
Yeah.
You bedazzle your basic life, as the Thorse puts it.
Yes. Bedazzle your basic life.
You take the trip, but you stay in a hostel instead of the 5-star resort. And you capture that margin to protect your $88 multiplier.
Exactly.
But protecting that money requires confronting the biggest delusion of your 20s, which is the illusion of invincibility. You think you are Wolverine.
You really do.
You think your body heals instantly, and disaster only strikes other people.
And that invincibility complex is biological. The prefrontal cortex, which handles long-term risk assessment, isn't even fully developed until around age 25.
Oh, wow.
So young people routinely drive cars without adequate insurance, or they opt out of health insurance entirely to save $100 a month.
Just rolling the dice.
They are effectively driving a Formula One car at top speed without a seatbelt just to save a few pounds of weight.
And the statistical reality of that is so grim. 37% of adults cannot cover a $400 unexpected expense in cash.
They would have to finance it.
Yeah, put it on a high-interest credit card. Furthermore, nearly 67% of bankruptcies are tied primarily to medical bills.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It is. A single appendicitis or a torn ACL from a pickup basketball game, and suddenly that $88 multiplier is wiped out because you are servicing medical debt.
Which is why the mechanical foundation of wealth building before you even buy a single stock is liquidity.
Okay, unpack that.
You must have your highest insurance deductible sitting in a highly liquid cash account.
Right.
So if your car insurance deductible is $1,000 and your health insurance deductible is $3,000, you need $3,000 in cash, untouched at all times.
It is a buffer against ruin. Because those low probability, high cost emergencies, they don't care about your potential energy.
Not at all.
Once the deductible is covered and the baseline risks are mitigated, the focus shifts to capturing the multiplier. And the monthly savings required to hit $1 million by retirement illustrates the decay of time perfectly.
The math here is terrifying if you start late.
It really is. At age 20, you only need to invest $95 a month.
It is an almost trivial amount of money for the outcome it produces.
$95.
Yeah.
But if you wait until age 30, that monthly requirement jumps to $340.
Right.
If you delay until age 40, you have to find over $1,000 every single month just to reach that same $1 million finish line.
The math is literally screaming at you to start early.
It is. But the friction is that investing feels so opaque. The financial industry uses these acronyms, yield curves, and market timing charts that make the average 22-year-old completely paralyzed.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the complexity is often intentional.
Wait, really?
Oh, absolutely. The financial services industry justifies its fee structures by manufacturing an aura of extreme sophistication.
Right. They want you to think it's rocket science.
Exactly. They want you to believe that without their proprietary insights, you will fail. But the reality for a 20-something is that their savings rate is exponentially more important than their asset allocation.
So how do we bypass that manufactured complexity?
By utilizing a target retirement index fund.
Okay.
It is the ultimate behavioral hack for the accumulation phase. It strips away the ego of trying to beat the market, and it removes the paralysis of choice.
Let's break down the mechanics of a target date fund, because it really is a brilliant piece of financial engineering. You only have to answer 2 questions.
Right. First, how much money can you save?
And second, what year do you plan to retire?
That's it.
So if you are 20 years old right now, you might pick a 2065 target date fund. You just put your money in, and the fund itself does the internal rebalancing.
And we call that internal rebalancing the glide path.
The glide path.
Yeah. So when you are 20, the fund might be 90% equities, meaning stocks, and 10% fixed income, like bonds.
Because it's highly aggressive, since you have the time horizon to recover from any market crashes.
Exactly. As the calendar moves closer to the year 2065, the fund managers automatically sell off portions of the risky equities and buy more stable bonds.
Okay, so by the time you are 64, the fund has organically shifted to perhaps 60% bonds and 40% stocks.
Right. It protects the wealth you've built right when you need to start withdrawing it.
And you never have to log in and manually trade a single share. You completely remove the human error of panic selling during a recession.
The primary goal in your 20s is establishing the automated behavioral habit of investing. You just eliminate the friction.
But time marches on. The mathematical invincibility of the 20s eventually collides head-on with reality.
It always does.
The margin you enjoyed disappears. Welcome to your 30s. The decade widely referred to as the messy middle.
Oh, the messy middle. It is rough.
And the defining characteristic of this decade is total, unrelenting chaos.
It really is. The messy middle is characterized by a brutal paradox. The days feel endlessly long, but the years just vanish. You suddenly find yourself strapped for the 2 most valuable resources in existence.
Yeah.
Discretionary time and discretionary money.
Because you have a mortgage, you might have toddlers who require constant supervision and super expensive daycare.
Right.
Your career is entering a phase where significant output is demanded for promotions, and maybe you have an aging parent who needs help. You are being pulled in a dozen directions simultaneously.
And psychologically, this creates a massive vulnerability to lifestyle creep.
Oh, for sure.
The Diderot effect takes hold.
Explain the Diderot effect.
So you buy a slightly nicer house in a better neighborhood. Okay. Suddenly your old furniture looks out of place, right? So you finance a new couch.
Yep.
Then you notice your neighbor's landscaping. So you hire a service and you rationalize the spending because you are working 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
And you feel this intense psychological need to reward yourself.
Right. You feel like you've earned the luxury.
Exactly.
It's the absolute peak of keeping up with the Joneses. But the irony is, the Joneses are usually up to their eyeballs in debt.
Oh, almost always.
The foundational wealth you built in your 20s is heavily stress-tested in your 30s. And the most abrasive stress test is confronting your own mortality.
This is a tough one.
I consider myself a highly organized person, but this specific statistic stopped me cold.
What is it?
Only 24% of Americans have a legal will.
Wow.
That means 76%. 3 out of every 4 people you walk past on the street have absolutely no legal framework for what happens to their children or their assets if they die unexpectedly.
It is a staggering failure of planning. But it's driven entirely by human psychology.
Really? How so?
Well, we possess a profound aversion to contemplating our own death. Psychologists refer to it as terror management theory.
Terror management theory.
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It is. Thinking about dying causes such acute cognitive dissonance that our brains simply refuse to engage with the task. We just put it off forever.
Let's talk about the friction of actually executing a will, too.
Oh.
Because it requires incredibly awkward conversation.
So hard.
You have to call up your sibling on a random Tuesday and ask, hey, if my spouse and I get hit by a semi-truck, do you want to take financial and legal responsibility for my toddlers for the next 18 years?
Right. It is a morbid, heavy interaction that nobody wants to initiate.
Nobody.
It is deeply uncomfortable. But consider the alternative.
Right.
The mechanical reality of dying intestate, meaning without a will, is that the state decides the fate of your children and your assets.
And nobody wants that.
No. It goes into probate court. A judge who has never met your family will appoint a guardian based on a rigid legal hierarchy.
Which could be the absolute wrong person.
Exactly. And your assets will be frozen while your grieving relatives potentially engage in bitter legal disputes over who gets what and who manages the money for the children.
You are effectively leaving behind a bomb.
That's exactly what it is.
Drafting a will, designating a guardian, assigning an executor, and setting up a trust to manage the assets.
Mm.
It's an act of profound love.
It really is.
It says, I care enough about you to ensure you aren't fighting in a courthouse while you are mourning.
The shift in your 30s is moving from a me mentality to a we mentality. You are no longer just protecting your own future, you are building a financial fortress around your dependents.
Which fundamentally alters how you handle risk.
Absolutely.
In your 20s, a 3-month emergency fund was, like, aspirational. In your 30s, a 3 to 6 month highly liquid emergency fund is a strict non-negotiable.
Because the surface area of potential disaster has expanded.
Right.
If you lose your job at 24, you sleep on a friend's couch and eat ramen.
No big deal.
But if you lose your job at 34, the bank still expects the mortgage payment, the pediatrician still needs to be paid, and the property taxes are still due. The buffer must be thicker.
And the insurance requirements evolve dramatically, too. We aren't just talking about health and auto deductibles anymore.
No.
We're talking about term life insurance to replace decades of lost income, disability insurance to protect your earning power if you were injured, and a tool that completely shifted my perspective on risk: umbrella insurance.
Umbrella insurance. It is perhaps the most misunderstood and underutilized tool in the messy middle.
I have to admit, before digging into these case studies for this deep dive, I thought umbrella policies were strictly for multimillionaires with yachts.
Most people do.
It just sounded like paranoia. But there was a specific scenario detailed in the research that highlighted the mechanical necessity of this coverage.
The school bus story.
Yes. Okay, so a teenager steps off a school bus, picks up a rock, and throws it toward a tree. Just impulsive, careless kid behavior.
Right.
But the rock deflects and strikes another student in the eye, causing severe permanent damage.
A completely tragic accident. But mechanically, it immediately triggers a massive liability lawsuit.
Right.
The parents of the injured child will sue for medical costs, pain and suffering, and future lost wages.
And most people assume their standard homeowner's insurance covers them in a situation like this. But standard liability limits might cap out at, say, $300,000.
Exactly.
If the settlement is for $1.5 million, the family whose child threw the rock is facing total financial liquidation. Their home equity, their non-retirement savings, their future wages, all garnished or seized.
This is precisely the mechanism of an umbrella policy. It sits over top of your existing home and auto policies.
Okay.
Once the standard $300,000 limit is exhausted, the umbrella policy activates and covers the remaining liability, typically up to $1 or $2 million.
And the cost for this massive shield is usually only a few $100s a year.
Right, because the probability of the event is low. But the magnitude of the protection is monumental. It shields the wealth you've spent the last decade building from freak, uncontrollable chaos.
It is the ultimate sleep-at-night policy. Yeah. But just as you secure the perimeter against that chaos, the 30s introduce a completely different kind of adversary, the tax code.
Ah, taxes.
Because hopefully you are advancing in your career and making significantly more money. This brings us to the tax arbitrage game, and specifically the 25% versus 30% rule.
Right. As income rises, the simplicity of a target date fund needs to be augmented with strategic tax placement. The core decision is whether to put your money into a traditional pre-tax account or a post-tax Roth account.
Let's clearly define the mechanics of both, just so we're all on the same page.
Good idea.
With a traditional pre-tax 401k, you get a tax deduction today. You don't pay taxes on the money now, it grows tax deferred, but the IRS taxes every dollar you withdraw in retirement as ordinary income. With a Roth account, you pay the taxes today on the seed money. You get no deduction now, but it grows tax-free, and you pull the money out in retirement completely tax-free. Okay. You pay taxes on the seed, but the harvest is yours.
So the heuristic to navigate this choice involves your combined federal and state marginal tax rate.
Okay.
If that combined rate is below 25%, the math generally favors the Roth. You lock in a relatively low tax rate today and secure decades of tax-free growth.
But if your combined marginal rate is above 30%, the traditional pre-tax route becomes highly attractive.
Exactly. The immediate tax savings you generate by lowering your current taxable income at that high bracket are simply too valuable to pass up. You take the guaranteed savings today.
So what happens if you're in the middle?
Well, the friction occurs in that middle zone, between 25 and 30%. This is where variables like your expected income trajectory, future legislative tax changes, and your specific state of residence complicate the math.
It gets messy.
It does. It is the moment in wealth building where simplicity inevitably yields to complexity due to your own success.
It is the realization that logging into an online tax software on April 14th and answering multiple choice questions is no longer sufficient. Your financial life has outgrown your DIY capabilities.
And admitting that requires a specific kind of humility.
It really does.
Many high achievers struggle with the psychological hurdle of delegating their tax strategy. They assume they can optimize it themselves. But the tax code is a specialized discipline.
So you navigate the messy middle. You draft the will, you deploy the umbrella shield, you start optimizing your tax buckets. And as the chaos begins to stabilize, you arrive at the peak of your earning years, your 40s.
The 40s.
And the psychological landscape here undergoes a massive shift. You are standing at a fork in the road.
The 40s are defined by acute reflection. You have a long enough track record to objectively evaluate your trajectory. You are either looking back and celebrating the compounding results of the habits you built in your 20s, or you are looking back with a creeping sense of panic, realizing your job never materialized into a stable career and your savings are deeply inadequate.
Okay, let's unpack this panic, because the panic is driven by the math.
Always math.
Let's revisit our wealth multiplier. At age 20, $1 had the time to turn into $88. By the time you wake up at age 40, that multiplier has collapsed.
It shrinks so much.
That same single dollar now only has the time to turn into $7 by retirement age. 7. The leverage is gone.
The margin for error has basically evaporated. You can no longer rely on sheer time to mask your mistakes. The mathematical reality is that you must inject significantly more capital into the system to achieve the same result.
Which means every dollar you lose to inefficiency, fees, or taxes is magnified. The IRS transitions from being like a nuisance to a major structural threat to your accumulated wealth.
Absolutely.
You have to actively build 3 distinct tax buckets to defend your money. The pre-tax bucket, the tax-free Roth bucket, and the after-tax brokerage bucket.
Because having all 3 buckets provides you with control. It dictates how you will be taxed in the future. If you only have one bucket, the IRS controls your destiny.
There is a case study in the source material that perfectly illustrates the catastrophic danger of ignoring this. The story of Robert and Carrie, the van life millionaires.
Oh, this is a great example.
This blew my mind because they did the hard part correctly. They were incredibly disciplined savers. They built a massive multi-million-dollar portfolio. They retired early, bought the van, and hit the road.
Living the dream.
They achieved financial independence, but they had a structural flaw that was quietly ticking in the background.
Right. Almost the entirety of their accumulated wealth was trapped in the traditional pre-tax bucket. They had maximized their 401ks for decades.
Which means they didn't actually own all that money. When you have money in a pre-tax account, you essentially have a mortgage with the IRS.
That's a great way to put it.
The government owns a percentage of that account, and eventually, they will demand their cut.
And the mechanism the government uses to force that taxation is called a required minimum distribution, or RMD.
RMD.
Currently, when you reach age 75, the IRS mandates that you must withdraw a specific percentage of your pre-tax accounts every single year, regardless of whether you actually need the money to live on.
And this is where Robert and Carrie were sitting on a tax bomb. Their pre-tax balance had grown so massive that their future RMDs were going to be astronomical. The IRS was going to force them to withdraw huge sums of money annually.
Let's look at the tax bracket mechanics of that forced withdrawal.
Okay.
Robert and Carrie were living modestly in their early retirement. They were in a very comfortable 12% marginal tax bracket.
Oh, nice and low.
But when those massive RMDs activated at age 75, that forced income would stack on top of their Social Security, violently propelling their last dollars of income all the way up into the 32% marginal tax bracket.
They were going to lose nearly a third of their wealth to taxes, simply because of forced timing.
This is where active strategic intervention is required. A passive approach would have ruined them.
Wow.
So financial planners analyzed their tax bomb and implemented a strategy known as a Roth conversion ladder.
The mechanics of a Roth conversion ladder are brilliant, but psychologically counterintuitive.
Very much so.
Between their early retirement and age 75, Robert and Carrie intentionally withdrew tranches of money from their pre-tax accounts. They voluntarily paid taxes on that money at their current low 12 to 22% rates, and then moved the money permanently into their tax-free Roth bucket.
The psychological friction is immense there. You are asking a client to voluntarily write a massive check to the IRS today to avoid a hypothetical larger check decades in the future.
Right.
Human nature naturally resists paying a tax before it is absolutely due.
But the mathematical outcome of overcoming that psychological resistance is staggering. By executing those strategic Roth conversions over a series of years, Robert and Carrie flattened out their future tax curve.
The projections showed they would end up with nearly $3.5 million more in total assets over their lifetime.
Wait, say that again.
$3.5 million more in assets, and they would pay $1.3 million less in taxes to the IRS.
Over $1 million in wealth preserved, not by picking better stocks, but purely through the mechanical manipulation of tax brackets.
It really underscores why the 40s demand active management.
And that active management extends to how you handle market volatility, too. This brings us to tax loss harvesting.
Yes.
Which, when I first read about it, felt like a literal cheat code for the stock market.
It is a highly effective strategy to turn market turbulence into a tangible asset.
Normally, when geopolitical chaos erupts or a recession hits, the market dips and your portfolio bleeds red. The standard behavioral response is either sheer panic selling at the bottom or covering your eyes and praying it bounces back.
Right.
But tax loss harvesting flips the dynamic.
Yeah.
You don't just endure the loss, you harvest it.
So the mechanism works like this. You intentionally sell the losing asset to lock in the loss on paper.
Yeah.
The IRS allows you to use that capital loss to offset capital gains elsewhere in your portfolio, or even deduct up to $3,000 against your ordinary income.
But wait, if I sell my index fund when it's down, don't I miss the rebound when the market inevitably recovers?
That is the critical nuance, and it revolves around a mechanism called the wash sale rule.
Wash sale rule.
Yes. The IRS states that you cannot claim the tax loss if you buy the exact same or a substantially identical asset within 30 days before or after the sale.
So if I sell an S&P 500 ETF from Vanguard, I can't just buy that exact same Vanguard S&P 500 ETF 5 minutes later to capture the loss.
Correct. But you can buy a highly correlated asset.
Ah.
You might sell the Vanguard S&P 500 fund to capture the loss and immediately buy a Russell 1000 fund from a different provider. The performance of the two funds will be nearly identical, ensuring you remain invested for the rebound, but you successfully navigated the wash sale rule and captured a valuable tax deduction.
You legally game the system by swapping the engine while the car is still moving. It is brilliant.
It really is.
But you know it isn't brilliant? The psychological trap that snares people right as they master these concepts. The phenomenon known as dumb doctor deals.
Ah, yes. It is a pervasive behavioral anomaly.
Walk us through it.
So, around age 47 to 49, the typical diligent investor crosses the seven-figure mark. They become a millionaire.
Woohoo.
And suddenly, a dangerous ego inflation occurs.
They look at the boring, effective target date funds and index funds that built their wealth, and they think, I have $1 million now. I am wealthy. Wealthy people don't invest like regular people. I need exclusivity. I need sexy sizzle.
Exactly. They seek out private placements, complex real estate syndications, and angel investments.
And it backfires.
The irony is that the very traits that made them successful in their primary profession, high intelligence, confidence, specialized knowledge, convince them they can easily master complex, opaque financial vehicles.
I was trying to map this behavior, and it's like a successful marathon runner. You train for years, you build your stamina, you pace yourself perfectly for 26 miles.
Right.
And then 10 feet away from the finish line, you suddenly decide, I'm going to start doing backflips.
That is a perfect analogy.
It is completely unnecessary risk that only serves your ego.
The backflip analogy captures the ego perfectly, but we need to examine the mechanical reasons why these specific investments destroy wealth.
Let's do it.
It isn't just about showing off. These deals carry massive illiquidity premiums.
Meaning you can't get your money out.
Exactly. When you invest in a real estate syndication, your money is locked up for 5, 7, or 10 years. You cannot sell your position if you have an emergency.
You are trapped in the vehicle.
Furthermore, they often involve capital calls.
It's a capital call.
If the project goes over budget, the general partners can legally demand that you inject more cash into the deal or you forfeit your existing equity.
Oh, wow.
And the fee structure is hidden deep within the private placement memorandums, which almost nobody reads, by the way, often ensure the promoters get paid handsomely, even if the investors take a loss.
So you are abandoning a highly liquid, incredibly cheap index fund for an illiquid, expensive, opaque vehicle simply because someone called you an accredited investor and stroked your ego.
Yep. The antidote to this ego trap is engaging a fiduciary advisor.
Okay, let's clarify that term because the financial industry loves to blur the lines. What is the legal distinction of a fiduciary?
The distinction is paramount. A standard broker operates under the suitability standard.
Okay.
They are only legally required to recommend products that are broadly suitable for your situation, even if those products pay the broker a massive hidden commission and aren't the absolute best option for you.
That sounds like a conflict of interest.
It is. But a fiduciary operates under the best interest standard. They are legally bound to place your financial interests above their own.
So hiring a fiduciary isn't just about outsourcing the math. It is about hiring a structural barrier to protect you from your own ego.
Precisely.
It is paying someone to tell you, no, you do not need to invest $100,000 in your golf buddy's emu farm. They keep you on the conveyor belt of compound interest.
You are buying an objective third party to veto your worst behavioral impulses.
Which brings us to the final phase. You survived the fork in the road of your 40s. You didn't do any marathon backflips. We roll into the 50s and beyond. The legacy phase.
Legacy phase.
If the 40s were a fork in the road, the 50s are where someone cranks the volume dial all the way to maximum.
Everything gets amplified.
The reality of every single choice you made in your 20s, 30s, and 40s completely crystallizes right here.
The dichotomy of celebrate or panic is intensely amplified. If you consistently lived beyond your means and kicked the can down the road, the mathematical runway has officially run out.
The panic is absolute.
But if you did the difficult work, this is the decade where the joy of wealth truly blossoms.
And the research emphasizes a crucial psychological pivot here.
Yeah.
You must focus on memory building.
Memory building.
You have the resources. Bedazzle your life. Take the multi-generational family trips. Buy the experiences. Don't die with the highest possible high score on a bank screen while sacrificing your actual life experiences.
But naturally, the underlying architecture must still be maintained.
Wow.
This requires executing estate planning 2.0.
Because that awkward will we drafted back in our 30s when we were broke and had toddlers is completely obsolete.
Entirely obsolete. You are no longer trying to protect a modest life insurance payout. You are now directing the flow of a multi-million-dollar portfolio.
And the kids are grown.
Right. Your children are adults. They have their own complex lives, their own spouses, and perhaps their own financial liabilities.
So the strategy changes.
It has to. Leaving a massive lump sum of cash directly to an heir who has a gambling addiction or who is going through a bitter divorce is financially catastrophic.
The mechanics of legacy planning become highly specialized here. We have to look at how assets are structured. For example, if you have a special needs beneficiary, you cannot simply leave them an inheritance.
No. Doing so could immediately disqualify them from essential government assistance programs like supplemental security income or Medicaid.
Who they desperately need.
You have to establish a special needs trust.
Right.
The trust holds the assets and distributes them in a way that supplements rather than replaces the government benefits, ensuring the beneficiary's quality of life is maintained without blowing up their safety net.
And the tax legislation is constantly shifting beneath our feet, too. We mentioned the Roth accounts earlier. It used to be that you could leave a massive Roth IRA to your children, and they could stretch out the tax-free growth over their entire lifetime.
The Secure Act fundamentally altered that mechanism.
Yeah, that changed everything.
Now, non-spouse beneficiaries are generally required to liquidate the inherited IRA within 10 years. The stretch provision is dead.
It's gone.
So navigating how to pass down tax-advantaged money without triggering unintended tax cliffs for your heirs requires intricate legal structuring.
It is basically playing three-dimensional chess with the IRS from beyond the grave.
That's a good way to look at it.
But while you are still alive and approaching retirement, the psychological posture of your investments must shift. In your 20s and 30s, the goal was pure accumulation. You were gathering resources.
Right.
In your 50s, the mandate shifts to preservation. You have to stress test the structural integrity of your portfolio against disaster scenarios.
And this requires understanding the profound difference between risk tolerance and risk capacity.
This was a massive revelation for me, Before reviewing these mechanics for the deep dive, I assumed risk tolerance and risk capacity were just interchangeable terms for how aggressive you were.
It is a common and very dangerous misconception.
Okay, so break it down.
Risk tolerance is purely psychological.
Hmm?
It is a measurement of your emotional fortitude. When the market drops 20%, do you panic and sell, or do you sleep peacefully knowing it will eventually recover?
It is how much turbulence you can handle on a roller coaster without losing your lunch.
Exactly. But risk capacity is entirely mathematical. It is an objective measurement of your financial plan's structural integrity.
Okay.
Regardless of how brave you feel, can your portfolio actually afford to absorb a 20% hit just 2 years before you retire without completely destroying your ability to fund your basic lifestyle?
So the capacity is the physical integrity of the roller coaster track itself.
Yes.
It does not matter if you have the emotional tolerance of a fighter pilot. If the track is rusted out and you hit a 20% drop, the car is going to derail.
The mechanism behind this is called sequence of return risk.
Sequence of return risk.
If you experience a massive market crash at age 30, it doesn't matter because you are still contributing capital and buying shares at lower prices.
Right.
But if you experience that exact same market crash the year you retire and you are forced to sell shares at depressed prices just to buy groceries, your portfolio sustains permanent, irreversible damage. You cannibalize the principal.
So your portfolio must be aligned with your mathematical capacity, not just your psychological ego.
Exactly.
Which segues perfectly into a story from the research that encapsulates the supreme arrogance of the 50s.
Oh, this story.
A client had been working with a financial advisory firm for 2 decades. They successfully built substantial wealth together. And then, precisely as the client hits the most treacherous, complex phase of his financial life approaching retirement, he calls the advisor and says, "You know what? I'm concerned about the advisory fees. I think I have the hang of this. I'm going to manage it myself."
It is a profound lack of humility. Right at the moment when the decisions are most irreversible, human nature whispers that we can do it alone just to save a fraction of a percent in fees.
It is utter madness. It is the equivalent of flying as a passenger on a commercial jet for 5 hours, and right as the pilot is lining up the runway to land the plane in a raging thunderstorm, you bust into the cockpit and say, "I've watched you do this for a while. I'll take the controls from here to save a few bucks on the ticket price."
The turbulence in that landing phase is severe.
Obviously.
The client is abandoning the pilot exactly when he has to navigate Social Security optimization, sequence of return risk, and hidden tax cliffs like Medicare IRMAA surcharges.
We have to explain IRMAA because it is the ultimate hidden trapdoor for retirees.
Okay, so IRMAA stands for the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It is essentially a hidden tax on successful retirees.
The hidden tax.
Medicare Part B and Part D premiums are based on your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years prior.
2 years prior. Okay.
If you do a clumsy Roth conversion or sell a property and your income spikes even one single dollar over a specific IRMAA threshold, your Medicare premiums can double or triple for the year.
$1 over the line, and you trigger a massive financial penalty.
Navigating those cliffs requires precision engineering. Hiring a professional is not a failure of your DIY competence. It is an acknowledgement of complexity.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know. By delegating the complexity, you are buying peace of mind. You are buying the ability to, as the methodology suggests, own your time.
Owning your time. That is the ultimate dividend of wealth. Let's pull all these threads together because we have mapped out a massive behavioral journey today.
We started in the 20s dissecting the psychological urge to look rich and the mechanical power of the $88 wealth multiplier fueled by early frugality and target date funds.
We battled through the chaotic, messy middle of the 30s. We recognized how lifestyle creep drains our resources. We explored the morbid but necessary mechanics of probate and wills, and we deployed umbrella policies to shield against unpredictable ruin.
We navigated the critical fork in the road of the 40s. We analyzed the decay of the time multiplier, the necessity of building 3 distinct tax buckets to disarm RMD tax bombs, the mechanics of tax loss harvesting, and the vital importance of a fiduciary to protect us from the illiquidity traps of our own ego.
And finally, we arrived in the 50s. We confronted the reality of sequence of return risk, the difference between emotional tolerance and mathematical capacity, and the ultimate humility of outsourcing the final approach to avoid the hidden cliffs of the tax code.
The through line connecting all of these decades is that respecting the mathematical multiplier early provides a behavioral shield against the chaos of life later.
Absolutely. The mechanics are the foundation, but the psychology is the engine.
Well said.
To wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a specific, provocative thought experiment. Something to deconstruct while you commute or while you wash the dishes tonight.
I love this.
I want you to vividly visualize your 80-year-old self. Imagine that future version of you has somehow figured out time travel. They have transported back to this exact moment, and they are sitting across from you right now at your kitchen table.
Okay.
They are looking at your current bank accounts. They are examining your daily habits, your financial stresses, the things you envy and the things you buy.
Right.
Based on the psychological traps and the mechanical realities we unpack today, what is the one specific thing your 80-year-old self would beg you to stop caring about right now?
That's a powerful question.
And what is the one single action they would beg you to start executing today?
Right.
Let the visual of that time traveler guide the intent behind the very next dollar you spend.